So thanks so much for getting on this impromptu Zoom call. We thought that we would get this education out to you, as more people, what we're finding, are buying Swan machines, getting into the shave ice business and doing it mobily. So, food trucks are becoming more popular, events are becoming more popular, and pop-ups are becoming more popular. And electricity is becoming a big question mark. Not a lot of people know how to efficiently and effectively power their entire business. As far as the Swan machine, what we're finding out is that this is a particularly unique case where you have a piece of equipment that has an electric motor that starts and stops hundreds of times in a day. And it's one of the only things that we can really think of that has this type of motor that starts and stops, starts and stops, starts and stops. With this type of shaver, properly powering this start and stop is going to be very, very important. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences people have been having with their shavers. And if, wholly, when you go into a new business, you think that you can just plug something into a socket, and if it turns on, we're good to go. It works. We're properly powering something because it turns on. That's not the case. And so that's basically what we're going to be talking about today, because there's been some recent troubleshooting and recent issues that have been happening that result in ill powering the equipment that you're using. Have it be your shaver, having it be your AC, having it be your lights, having it be everything running all together. So with the troubleshooting here with the Swan, what we've been hearing is people are calling and they've had their machine for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 2 months, and their motor is humming. It doesn't start, or it's sluggishly repeating, like it takes a little bit for it to start. It starts really slow. We've had people call us and say, yeah, it hums and then it starts and then it runs backwards. We've had people call and it says it trips the breaker. And so all of these issues result in not powering your machine correctly. So what happens with power is there's a starting wattage or amperage that it surges at the beginning and then it runs. And so a lot of people are powering with an extension cord that is either too long or the wrong thickness. And we'll go into that in a minute. They're using the wrong generator. So using a generator that is not able to efficiently power their whole entire trailer. Because when you get the machine, you're also running your AC, you're also running your little mini fridge, etc. And so you have to think of the whole kit and caboodle before you buy or, get the proper generator. With some of these troubleshootings, a lot of it can be replaced with just a small horseshoe looking piece called the starter switch. It's part number 20. And all of the humming motor, the starting, sluggishly repeating, run backwards, trips the breaker, these are all because this little horseshoe piece in the back of the motor burns because it hasn't been properly powered, and it's underpowered all of this time. So the motor is not, it's like, I reference it like a water hose, where you have 100-foot water hose, you turn on the water, and it's going to take a long time for that energy or that water to reach the end of that 100-foot hose versus using a proper extension cord of 25 feet or less, the power will come or the water will come much faster. So this fix of the humming motor or starting sluggishly, running backwards, trips the breaker can be fixed, and you don't have to get a motor. It's just that horseshoe piece. But then you have to fix the problem. So you can't just go on to running business as usual, because the same thing is going to happen again. There's either too much being powered into an outlet, the wrong amount of gauge or length of extension cord is being used, or the too small of a generator is being used. There's a couple of other new troubleshooting that we have experienced. I'm not going to go into huge detail with it because it has been somewhat localized, but there is a kind of a motor lockup which it trips the overload, and we've seen some worm gear issues. There have some shards have maybe gotten between the worm gear and the plate, which locks up the motor. We've seen some of that happening. And then ice is not coming out like it used to. That's probably our number one complaint. When anybody gets a new shaver, the factory does not properly use the correct tension of the shaver to use with the ice block. And so people don't obviously read the instruction manual. You can actually download this, and it is highly encouraged to get comfortable with this manual and have your dealers read this manual too, because there's a lot of real good updated information in there. Knowing how to properly use the tension of the brake shoe is going to be very important too. And that, like I said, is our number one complaint. And we can just have them go reference our video. I always say you should never put your hand on the wheel. And if you do, that means that you don't have the proper tension. I know a lot of old time people, it's just habit and they do that. And I guess that's fine. You are the brake then, and your brake shoe will never go bad. But there is the proper tension that can be put on that brake to prevent you from doing that. We want everybody to plug directly into a dedicated 15 amp power source. So when you're plugging something into an outlet, have that Swan shaver have a dedicated circuit so that it's not running that motor or underpowering that motor. It would not be advised, for example, to plug in a Swan Ice Shaver and a bun machine into the same circuit, because it's going to underpower both items, and you're going to have problems with the compressor, and you're going to have problems with the electric motor. Only using a 3-prong 10 gauge extension cord. And we recently changed the extension cord gauge from a 12 to a 10, simply because you'll never go wrong with a 10. You can, if you have 12 gauge existing extension cords, go ahead and use those, but nothing more than 25 feet when it comes to a 12 gauge. Okay. The longer the longer the extension cord, the more you're going to ill power that or underpower your shaver and your equipment. And it's going to create issues in the long run. Okay. And it's going to create issues because of that constant start stop that Swan machine needs in order to work. Okay. Do not do this. Do not use an inverter. So do not use DC power. Change it into AC to run your shaver. That's a huge no-no. That'll underpower your shaver and your motor will go out. And that motor is $400 to replace. And that's something that we hear. It voids the warranty if you are ill powering your shaver. Don't use surge protectors. And no longer than 25 feet. Now, I understand if there's a problem, you need a longer cord in order to run. I would, if that is the case, make it a limited time that you're doing this. You can run the shaver on a 10 gauge, 50-foot cord for an event. You're not going to damage long-term, but it is going to put stress on that shaver. So it's not something that you're going to want to do on a routine basis. Okay. Tommy, do you have anything to add, or am I okay so far?
Yeah, I would just add, it's not a safe enough assumption that there's not a second outlet on the same circuit in any capacity. So if you're in a building that has one outlet and you're not sure if there's a second draw source, so let's say you plug your shaver directly into an outlet and then, 10 feet away is another outlet, you need to determine if it's on the same series. So it's not good enough if you plug in your shaver to that outlet and then you plug in your freezer to another outlet. If they're on the same circuit, that's still too much power. Too much power draw on the two separate devices. As long as, the caveat to that is, as long as you've measured the starting amp draw on both devices and they're under 15, technically that can work, still not advised. The second thing is, if you do use an extension cord in any capacity, make sure it's not coiled. So if you're in a pinch and you've got a 50-foot 10 gauge cord, don't coil it. The reason for that is coiling wire creates an electrical field. If you create an electrical field that hits that motor, that's how you get motors that spin backwards. It's one of the ways that motors can spin backwards. So in the event that you are using an extension cord, and again, we're not recommending you use one over 10 feet anyway, over 25 feet anyway. But if you are, under no circumstances, coil that. That's what I've got.
Thanks, T.
Yep.
So coiling means keeping in a ball. So rounding it in a circle, putting it in a bundle. We want that cord long and the length of what is needed. And we'll talk about that in a minute here. Generators, very, 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 very important. There's two types of generators for those that don't know. We have the normal gas generators that are fueled by oil, gas, petrol, whatever you want to call it. And then there's what we call inverter generators, which are quiet and somewhat new. And food trucks really like them because they are quiet. And some events are actually requiring them now just for noise pollution. So with the generator, what is very important and what a lot of people don't realize is that you really need to double the amount of wattage that you would typically need. So what you have to do is, when you start your business, you have to pick everything that's electric, okay? So your freezer, let's say, your AC, your small refrigerator, your lights, your bun machine, your Vitamix machine, add it all up, all of the wattage, okay? And put it on a piece of paper. And if you don't know, don't guess, because that's another error. You can't assume that it's one thing, because I would actually call the manufacturer and say, what is the wattage? What's the running wattage and what's the starting wattage? There's two different levels, the starting and the running wattage of everything. Everything that has a electric motor has a surge, okay? Unlike a light, for example, that you just turn on and there's a steady flow. So anything electric that has an electric motor always has a surge, and there's two different wattages that you need to pay attention to, okay? When you're purchasing a generator, you have to take in mind that starting wattage is probably the number that you're going to want to put on that piece of paper to add up, okay? Once you add up all of that, let's say it's 3,000 watts. You're going to want to double that in order to get your generator, okay? That's for the surge. That's for any extra thing that you might plug in that you weren't aware of. Let's say you have a fan that day that it's hot out. Let's say somebody needs to, your next door neighbor needs a power source for that day. And there's a lot of instances that come up that you're going to want to always have more power than you need. So determine, going back to this, to determine which generator to purchase, add the equipment's total wattage. Then as a rule of thumb, multiply that total amount of watts needed by 2 in order to account for startup power. And that's what I would purchase. Okay. For a while, we were saying no to inverters simply because it's DC power, direct power from a battery, okay, going into AC power. And here at the home office, we didn't know enough. We didn't trust it right away. So we said, no, until we can find more information out about this, we're going to say, no, don't use them, because everybody that's calling in with these motor problems is using an inverter generator. Well, as we're learning and as we're discovering more about these inverter generators, we're realizing that people are using the wrong extension cord with a generator, which is problem number 1. And they're using not enough wattage for the generator, which is problem number 2. So we're saying it's okay at this time to use inverter generators, which are quiet and which are preferred, as long as you have the proper wattage and as long as you have the proper cords that are needed to plug in. Okay.
Can I add something to that, Katie?
Please.
Some of the higher end inverted generators are going to have something called an eco mode. I would recommend turning that off and not using that feature. An eco mode is going to throttle down the output of that generator and to try to match what the current draw is on it. And if you turn that feature off, it's just going to put it to its max output. And with how many times that the Swan Ice Shavers start and stop, it's going to confuse that generator, and it's best to just not use that feature. It's going to be different on every generator. Most of them are going to be called an ECO mode. It's like a power saving mode. It's one of the major draws to that generator is that it throttles down. That's one of the ways that it makes it fuel efficient, is it can throttle down to the load draw for what the electrical call is. And I've seen that on some of these generators that I've been looking into, and it's just, I would say don't use that feature.
I want to just add, for the starting wattage, it's all machines. It's written on the info voltage and wattage. They can have it from there without calling the manufacturer. Second, some of them there's written in watts, some of them in amps. Normally, Canada and the States, it comes, let's say, 12 amps or 7 amps. If it's in watts, how you calculate how much amps, you take, let's say, 3,000 watts divided by 120, which is 120 volts, you can get how many amps you need. So it makes 25 amps, let's say.
Right.
So the watts divided by volts, you can get the amps.
Right.
Because here, Canada and the States, it comes with amps. The breaker, it's 15 amps. It depends how much you need. So you calculate how many amps you need.
That's the equation. So yeah, take the wattage of a generator, divide that by 120 equals the total amps of the generator. And that's what I would use for the calculation. When new people are coming into this business, it is, they're experts in shave ice. They're not experts in electricity. And we've had to, become electricity experts in this matter, because all of these things are happening to these shavers. And it's just because it's ill powered, and it's unfortunate because that's not a warranty item. And so we feel that it is good to educate people on electricity and making sure that they are properly doing it. Now, Mickey, I love your example of, trailer manufacturers, setting you up, thinking that it's for success, and thinking that they always know your thing. But You have to be your number one advocate. You got to tell your dealers, you got to look out for you. This is your livelihood. They're just trying to sell you a shaver or a trailer. They don't know what you're trying to power inside of that trailer. Okay. They think, well, you're going to be running a shaver. You'll run the AC. The freezer is at a steady power. It just has a compressor. That's easy. Doesn't have too much of a surge. You should be fine with a 3,000 watt generator. No, and maybe they'll sell you one with that trailer. Don't buy that, because you are going to grow the business. The dealers are going to sell more and more. You are going to get another shaver. You are going to add to the menu. You really do have to advocate for yourself. You really do have to understand electricity 101. You don't have to be the expert. And if you don't understand something, ask. Would be a really good fix, Mickey, is to get a battery operated one. Then it's direct power. DC means direct current, which is a steady sense of power going to your shaver 100% of the time. You never have to worry about it being ill-powered or anything. It's just a constant surge. AC power is like this, okay? And it's choppy and it's dependent on the power source. So a lot of people have been going towards DCs for shavers, which is highly recommended, because then you don't have to worry about power at all. Moving forward with, finding the right generator for your trailer, like I said, Mickey, adding up all of that wattage, times that by 2, and that's the generator that you should be using. Kind of going into the cord thing, I have been guilty of this at my own home, where I need a location, right, for an outlet. And if it's not in the right spot, you're going to make do. Well, this is a big no-no, at home and in commercially. The more you plug in, the less things are going to be powered, the more it's going to trip, and you are going to be burning things out slowly. So don't plug in multiple shavers. Don't plug in anything into off of one cord. You're not going to be wanting to put 2 extension cords together, 225, 210s, nothing of that. Use the proper extension cord for the length that is needed. So you are going to have different sets of extension cords. If you are only 10 feet away from an extension cord or an outlet or your generator, you're not going to want to use a 100-foot cord to get you from there when you can use a 25, okay? Or a 10 or a 6. Do not drive over or place rugs over extension cords. I know that people like to get them out of the way, but it does generate heat, and that's not safe. And then, like Tommy mentioned, do not plug into a coiled up extension cords. It's a fire hazard in general, okay? And then there's this graphic that you can go into and you can read, but another one that I've seen happen is do not nail or staple electric cords to walls or baseboards. If you miss, you're SOL, and that's not a good thing. Always expect for cords for damage. I know we're in the business where these are, workhorse extension cords, and they get rugged and loose. If any of them are frayed at any of the outlet or the at any of the cord, toss them. It's a fire hazard. All the other ones here are pretty self-explanatory on this graphic here.
Okay, for extension cords, I suggest there's a power bar, which is 15 amp with the light and the breaker. You can use it. There's, let's say,
we don't want to use
3 or
that.
4 plugs. No, but if they have to use it, there's a breaker. So if they overcharge that wire, the breaker will goes off.
We don't recommend that.
Okay.
We don't recommend that because if you need that much power from that one area, that's a problem. Okay. You need to get a better power source from that. If you're plugging things into one source, that's a problem. That's a no-no, and you're going to want to find an alternative source. So using, however you're using your power, and you can give me an example of what you've used in the field, but those surge protectors are a no-no. And that's what we're finding. Tommy, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, just to kind of mirror what you said, like, I think what Paul's trying to say is that'll protect, in theory, that helps protect stuff. But Katie's on point with saying, if you're relying on that, then you haven't done your math right, and you're not supplying the correct amount of power. There's a surge protector built into the machine that trips at 6.5 amps, and if ideally in the ideal situation, you're supplying the correct amount of amperage to each machine that you need, and you're not relying on that surge protector to tell you that you're going over. Because any time that trips, that's interrupting power to all of the devices on it, and you want to try to minimize how often that happens.